Okay, so in this video, I'm going to create the logic and functions and capability to add the node, to persist the node, and to view the nodes. Okay, so first off, I need to create an array, or rather a script in the array, to store the nodes. And I'm going to put in my custom functions and scripts right after the jQuery, so that my custom code can be picked up by the jQuery mobile script to apply the transformation to make it responsive, to make it look like a jQuery mobile UI. So I'm going to declare my custom script tag here. Okay, and I'm going to use the self-executing function. So this ensures that your DOM, your HTML elements are fully loaded before you run any script inside here. So I'm going to create an array called nodes list, and I'm going to need a selected ID. So this will determine what the user has clicked on the nodes list before it brings you to the page on the node details page. Okay, so first off, I'm going to assign functionality to my add node button. So whenever I click on the add node, a new node will be displayed here. Okay, so I'm going to assign my event handler. So I'm going to just categorize or give a label to or name this section of the code so I can easily retrieve them later. Okay, so these are where my event handlers are assigned. Okay, and custom functions. So look for the button ID, button add node, on click. And it's going to run the statements here. Okay, so what you're going to do, you are going to create an object called node and specify it as a new object. And I'm going to pass in a title property for the node, and I'm going to retrieve the text from my tf underscore title. Remember the hash prefix because you're looking using jQuery selector to look for an element by ID, title, value. Node dot content equals to tf underscore content dot val. So what this means here is, in the first statement, you're going to create a memory object, and in this memory object, it has one property called title, and it's going to grab the title from this text field. This is what it means, because the ID of this text field is called tf underscore title, and it's going to grab the value from of the tf underscore content and going to pass it into the node.content. And this is what happens every time, after every time you click on the add node button. Of course, it doesn't do anything now. So next, I need to push this node into my nodes list. So this nodes list is like a central database for now in the memory cache to store all my nodes. And I'm going to use a loop to display all the nodes into my main view here. Okay, for now, I'm going to remove the existing test node because I don't need it for now. I don't need it longer. Next, assuming that you have added a node, now the node has been stored in the memory known as the nodes list array, but it has not been displayed out because you have not issued any statement or any instructions to tell your browser to display the nodes out into the list. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to look for the page nodes, which is my main page here, and assign an event handler known as the page before show. And every time before it shows something, before this page is shown, I'm going to run this set of code. So I'm going to use a for loop. Depending on the length of the nodes list, I'm going to run through all the items in the nodes list and increment my I every time it runs a loop. And I am going to append a list item into my nodes list with a list item. Okay. And I need to create it as a link that can link all the node item into the page view node. So I'm going to need my title here. And of course, I need an ID as well. Okay, so now I can start breaking up this. Okay, I'm going to close this statement first. ID. And we're going to take reference to depending on what is the current number on the nodes list. So let's say, for example, the first loop is 0, so this will be populated with 0. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to break this string up, and I'm going to concatenate with my I. And the title, I'm going to break it up as well, and concatenate with nodes list at loop I title. Okay. So depending on how many nodes you have, so if imagine you have 3 nodes, so first it will go into nodes list 0 and grab the title from 0. Then after it runs, finish this cycle, it will go to nodes list 1, and this will be replaced with 1, because I++ after every loop, and it will be nodes list 1 dot title, so on and so forth. Okay. So let me refresh this, and let me add a new node. Yep, there I have it. So I'm going to add a second node. There is an issue. You realize that the first node title is being added here again because you are appending to the existing content without removing the first one. So to fix this quirk, I am going to clear out the existing list nodes content before I go on. Oops. So this will ensure that everything is cleared out inside the list nodes before you start adding new items every time you come back to the page nodes page. So let me try this again. Okay. Yep, it works. Okay. Yep, it goes to view node as well, but you realize that the view node details have not been updated with the corresponding information. That's because there is nothing here to dictate what content are you going to display. So I'm going to add a new event handler on my view node page as well. Okay, sorry, before I go on, you realize that this list has no longer been reflecting the jQuery mobile UI interface framework. That's because the page before show runs after the jQuery mobile transformation. So things that have been added dynamically after the jQuery mobile transformation, you have to trigger the UI manually. So I'm going to call the list nodes list view API and call a refresh again. so that whenever I add a new thing, a new item dynamically, it's going to update with the jQuery mobile UI. Okay, code fixed. So like I said, I'm going to add new logic into the view node every time slightly before I show up the view node. So I'm going to add an event handler to my view nodes on page before show, similar to on page nodes, call function. And I am going to look for this refers to the page node. Find the tag with the class UI content, and I'm going to look for the h2 tag, which is referring to the page view node in the class UI content, specifically looking for h2 to change the h2 content. So I'm going to issue the HTML function, and I'm going to pass in nodes list selected id dot title. Okay, this will not work because right now by default the selected ID is 0. So how are we going to make sure that the selected ID has been updated with the latest selected ID? So that is where you're going to need to issue an event handler to all the list items that you have dynamically added on the for loop, after the for loop. So for all the list item in list nodes, I am going to assign an event handler when they are clicked on. I am going to set the selected ID to be this dot ID. Okay. So now, assuming that you have clicked on a certain item, okay, let me just add this and back again. You see, the selected ID right now is 0, and this will be populated with content with title from nodes list 0. So let me add a second row. If I click on the second item, the ID will be 1 instead of 0. And this will be reflected with nodes list index 1.title. The content has not been updated yet. So right now I'm going to add in another line very similar to this line. Instead of H2, I'm going to update the P. And I'm going to set it to content. So as I go into the view node, you see that the title gets updated and the content gets updated. Okay, let me just set it to something proper. So yep, there you have it. But there is an issue. As you can see, we do not persist the data yet. Every time we refresh the page or we close the browser, you will realize that your information is gone. So we're going to make use of local storage to make sure that the nodes list is persisted in the hard disk or in the cache of the browser. Well, so in order to do this, we're going to make sure that every time you add the nodes list is being stored in the persistent storage of the browser, which we're going to make use of the local storage to do this. Local storage nodes list. This is another way of declaring a variable, just that this nodes list belong to the local storage, which is a persistent data. And I'm going to pass nodes list into nodes list, but there is a problem here because nodes list only take in string. So in order for nodes list to be accepted as a accepted format, so we gotta call the JSON object stringify API to convert the nodes list array. So when the page nodes show up, runs the for loop, okay, we are going to make use of the nodes list in the local storage to be passed back into the regular nodes list array. So to do this, we are going to set the nodes list variable, which is an array, and JSON.parse to convert the local storage nodes list, which is currently a string, back into an array into nodes list. Okay. But there is a problem, because what if there is no data in nodes list to begin with? This is essentially undefined. Okay, for the first time. So in order to prevent this running into an error, we're gonna put a if condition statement. We're gonna check that local storage dot nodes list is not equals to undefined before we run the following statement. Yep. So you see, it works now. So if I add in a new content, and no matter how many times I refresh it, the data will be there. Oops.